Hello, Steve. Here we are, less than 2 weeks before the election, and we're speaking just a day or two before the debates. So we have a new poll, and the Liberals. I mean, the lead is shrinking a little bit.
Just a little bit. I mean, statistically speaking, it's still within the margin of error, but this is the first week in many that we've seen the Liberals not only plateau, but perhaps a hint of momentum to the Conservative Party of Canada. We've seen their numbers rebound just slightly, and a lot of the other pollsters are seeing the same numbers. So a little bit of a difference as we go into the debate night. And of course, there's just so much information jam-packed in this poll. I'm looking forward to uncovering it with you.
Oh yeah, and here we're talking about BC voters because you oversampled in BC, so it gives us a good sense of what's going on in Vancouver and the rest of the region, the island, and the rest of BC. So what are you seeing in terms of those regional breakdowns?
Yeah, let's look at the differences. And it's interesting this time around that federally speaking, we've got the Liberals at 43% if an election were held tomorrow, and Conservatives at 38, NDP at 8. And when you look at the BC results, it's not radically different. We got 42, 38, and 12. So NDP polls a little bit stronger, but for the first time in many federal elections, we don't have a different landscape in British Columbia. The Liberals are firmly entrenched in first place. And it's unlike other historical elections. If you look back to 2021, when the Liberal, it was really a very close three-horse race. 27% for the Liberals, 33% for the Conservatives, 29% for the NDP. Not much different in the 2019 election. And so British Columbia has kind of gone through the same thing as the rest of Canada, which is in the months leading up till January, the Conservatives were in full charge. They really owned this election. They couldn't lose it. Trump enters the scene early February, changes the landscape completely. Liberals surge. We were talking internally today about the fact that in every federal election, we've never seen a 22-point swing in such a short period of time in any federal election ever. So it truly is an unprecedented number. So in British Columbia, we have something that's completely different than what we've seen in the past.
Right. And let's start with the city of Vancouver and then work our way out. There, to your point about the NDP kind of disappearing, you see it most surprisingly in Vancouver, where typically you'd expect the NDP to win a couple of seats, but the Liberals are outpolling the Conservatives 2-1, and the NDP are below 10%.
It's just unheard of. Where did the votes go? Where has it gone? One of the strong indicators, I'll get back to the regional differences in just a second, but the NDP is a solid second choice. You've got about 26% of the nation and also British Columbians who say, yeah, if it wasn't for my first place choice, I would vote the NDP in. And so it's really not a great spot to be in as a politician. It's a winner take all, of course. So let's get into some of the regional numbers. Yes, Carney's Liberals are ahead 53% to 26% for Poilievre in City of Vancouver. Rest of Lower Mainland, the lead shrinks quite a bit, and it's more along the lines of our national poll, so 43-37. Vancouver Island sticks out as an anomaly, not just within British Columbia, perhaps within all of Canada, where it really is a three-horse race, with the Liberals slightly ahead of the Conservatives, 32-31, and then Singh's NDP party at 22%. So Vancouver Island, interestingly enough, might determine the fate of NDP's future and certainly of Singh's future.
And in BC, at least, that gender gap problem that we saw for the Conservatives seems to be shrinking a little bit, the gap between support amongst men and women.
It is, and we saw this in the provincial election. You remember us talking about that, where in traditional lines of voting, you would see a massive gap between men and women, not the massive gap that we see now. So among men and women, it's about split equally, 43 and 42% for the Liberal Party votes. And even the Conservative vote, which always has leaned heavily to men, is only outpacing women by 5 points, so 40% to 35. So that's a difference that we haven't seen in quite some time.
It's the NDP that has the gender gap on the other side there, 6% men and 16% women.
Yes, 3 times the number. That is a massive disconnect, and that's also historically not always been the case. I've never seen it more than double. It's usually about 50% bigger, but not 3 times.
I do like that you always ask some specific questions, about try to get inside the heads of our voters. And you're asking BC residents whether they're voting on hope or fear. I mean, you can tell us the specific wording of the questions, but what is it you're asking them there?
Well, it's like there's two different elections happening within this country and within this province. When you look at the intentions and the rationale behind the vote, it's really quite telling. So the sentiment that we arbitrarily picked, we picked, two options, and people were given a forced choice. And one option is, are you voting primarily for hope for a better future in Canada, to live, work, raise a family better than what it's been in the case in the past 5 years? Or are you voting primarily a fear for what the future holds for Canada in light of the U.S. trade actions and the aggressive behavior of Donald Trump and the need to protect Canada? So you have those two stark differences, and you get a day and night difference between conservative voters, who are 75% of them picking primarily a better hope for a future. And on the flip side, the Liberal voters are saying 60% are saying it's really about President Trump and the tariff issue. So again, very different motivations from the two parties that are most likely going to win the election.
And we see that reflected in terms of who they think would be the best prime minister on different issues. Poilievre rates higher than Carney around lowering taxes and fixing immigration, and Carney rates higher than Poilievre on dealing with the U.S. and national unity.
Yes, again, very different perspectives. Some of the numbers here, Poilievre, this is BC results specifically, 38% choose Poilievre, over 22% Carney for lowering taxes. That's not a surprise. Fixing the immigration system, Poilievre has a lead of 35 to 24. Even growing the economy, a slight lead to the Conservatives. But then you get into things like national unity, having what it takes to stand up against Trump, and having what it takes to maintain Canada's economy, given the trade war. And you're seeing numbers that are, 15 to 20 points higher for Mark Carney versus Poilievre. So clearly on those issues, he's owning the stage there and leaving Poilievre quite far behind.
So I expect the leaders are seeing these same numbers similar numbers in their internal polling, because, as you say, it's sort of reflective of what we've seen in some other recent polls. So, what's your advice to them? What do they need to do to get it across the finish line in these final 10 plus days?
Well, it is rare that you have the leaders debate that could define the outcome of this election. Remember, Poilievre hasn't had this opportunity. He's been waiting for years and years to have this moment in the limelight, and he typically is a pretty good debater and has more one-liner zingers, if you will, than Carney does. So despite that, there is an expectation among Canadians and British Columbians that Carney will win the debate. We'll see if that happens. And there's also an interesting finding that says about 19% of Canadians and British Columbians are actually paying attention to debate, and they say it could influence the actual outcome. Sorry, it's 14% in British Columbia. It's about 17% in the rest of Canada. Could the debate make you change your mind and vote for another party? Yes. And that leads me to another aspect of this election, which is interesting, is that the strength of the vote is not really as solid as what we've seen in other campaigns. Here we are with 2 weeks left, and we still have a significant number of voters that say that they could change their mind. So if you look at people that are leaning and preferring Liberals right now, we've got 25% of those who say that I could change my mind once election day comes. And on the flip side, the Conservative side, Conservative voters are saying that 21% could ultimately change their mind. So those are not rock solid numbers, given that we only have about a 5 or 6 point lead in the overall race. And it really suggests that the last 2 weeks are going to define the outcome of this election. And frankly, it's far too close to call, even for the most ambitious of pollsters.
And then I know their overall numbers are low, but there's a huge number of New Democrats who say they could still change their vote.
There is 65%. Like, it's, we're debating internally whether there will be a surge in the end of NDP as sort of a safe haven of protecting Canadians, or on the flip side, that number suggests that maybe that it could decimate the NDP party and even be less of an outcome in the final ballots, and that would favor the Liberals if that were the case.
Now, I know a lot of these numbers are kind of within the margin of error, but like you say, you've seen since March 31st, the last time I think you did the oversample, a 6% drop for the Liberals, Conservatives remaining about the same, and a +4 for the NDP. So is that people moving back from the Liberals to the NDP, or what does that represent?
It would, because their strong second choice in either of those party members or voters' lines are clearly the other. You don't have Liberal voters switching to Conservative and NDP voters switching Conservative. So that's the primary where their second choice is. And it could be that, the NDP has kind of changed their focus. Several weeks ago, Singh decided that he's not running for prime minister, he's running for opposition. And we've also seen a change in tactics, especially in their advertising campaigns, that are really targeting the notion that who's going to stand up and fight for the average worker, who's going to fight for the rights of Canadians, and the NDP is kind of clearly making some space there. So it seems to have resonated with provincial voters here, not so much in the rest of the country as you've seen in the numbers, but we have seen a slight uptick from our last poll, March 31st till now, in NDP vote intention.
All right. Well, I guess when we talk next, we'll just be days away from the election. So I look forward to that. Thank you, Steve.
We will, and we'll see if the debate has much of an influence on that. And maybe it is to Poilievre's advantage, but we'll certainly be polling right through. We'll have another poll next week and then one just before the election to finalize and tell your readers and viewers what is happening in the Canadian election scene.
All right. Thanks as always.
You bet.